Picture this. A piercing scream from a young girl reverberates through the ancient stone halls of Bletsoe Castle, piercing the frigid winter night of 1457 AD. The cry slices through the relentless howl of the wind outside, sharp as a dagger through fine velvet. In a dimly lit chamber, where candle flames dance erratically against the shadows, 13-year-old Lady Margaret Beaufort clutches at the crimson-stained linens beneath her, her frail form racked by an anguish no soul so young should bear. The midwives murmur fervent prayers in Latin, their expressions etched with solemn dread amid the flickering light. Beyond the walls, snow blankets the frozen earth of Bedfordshire in a silent shroud. But within this confined space, a future monarch of England is being wrenched from the body of a girl scarcely emerged from childhood. Margaret's auburn locks, matted with sweat, cling to her pallid face as another surge of torment engulfs her. Whispers spread among the attendants. She teeters on the brink of death, the infant too substantial, her narrow hips unprepared at such a tender age, her own growth incomplete. Yet here she endures, labouring to deliver the son destined to claim the English throne as Henry VII. The bitter irony hangs heavy in the air, unspoken yet palpable to all. This offspring, forged in such profound agony, will one day quell the most savage strife in England's annals and inaugurate the Tudor Dynasty, forever altering the course of nations. Before we plunge deeper into these veiled tales of endurance and torment, if the concealed realities of history captivate you, I invite you to tap that like button and subscribe for more explorations like this. And do share in the comments where you're tuning in from. It's truly remarkable how we converge from across the globe, bound by our mutual fascination with the echoes of yesteryear, bridging eras and distances through our quest for understanding. The young woman writhing upon that bed was no mere noble damsel. Lady Margaret Beaufort bore in her veins the lineage of sovereigns, tracing directly to John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster and fourth son of Edward III. Yet, as Margaret would discover across her remarkable existence, such regal heritage proved a double-edged sword, a boon in times of favour, a peril in the ruthless arena of 15th century England, where the Wars of the Roses loomed, poised to rend the kingdom asunder. In this era of shifting loyalties, noble blood rendered one either a prized asset in the Game of Thrones or a mortal liability to be eradicated. Margaret's journey to that fateful birthing room commenced years prior, amid the innocent pursuits of childhood in the verdant gardens of Bletsoe Castle. Born circa May 1443 AD to John Beaufort, 1st Duke of Somerset, and Margaret Beauchamp of Bletsoe, she was thrust into a realm where allegiances ebbed like tides and matrimony served as the supreme instrument of diplomacy. Her father perished when she was scarcely a year old, some accounts claim by his own despairing act following crushing defeats in France. Others murmur of insidious poison, for in those shadowed times, such suspicions trailed every untimely noble demise like scavengers, shadowing a marching host. The enigma surrounding John Beaufort's end cast a long shadow over Margaret's formative years. He had led English troops in France during the waning days of the 100 Years' War, witnessing in helpless anguish as conquests hard won by Henry V dissolved fragment by fragment. These setbacks gnawed at his spirit like an unrelenting malady. Upon his return to England in 1444 AD, observers remarked his sunken gaze and unsteady grasp. He withdrew into silence, scarcely partaking of sustenance, lost in vacant stares. On May 27, 1444 AD, he was discovered lifeless in his quarters at Wimborne Minster. The proclaimed verdict was fever, but intimates suspected darker truths, whether by steel, toxin, or the crushing burden of disgrace. John Beaufort had embraced oblivion over ignominy. Margaret's mother, the Dowager Duchess Margaret Beauchamp, brooked no delay in fortifying her daughter's prospects. She grasped the harsh imperatives of endurance in a society where females and offspring held worth solely in the bonds they could forge. By age 6, young Margaret was pledged to John de la Pole, heir to William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, a pact uniting two of England's mightiest houses in what appeared an indissoluble union. But the winds of fortune veered swiftly. When Suffolk plummeted from royal grace and met a gruesome end while traversing the English Channel in 1450 AD, that betrothal dissolved into insignificance. Suffolk's transgression lay in brokering Henry VI's union with Margaret of Anjou and ceding Maine and Anjou to France, concessions that ignited fury among nobles and populace alike. His execution was savage, even for that brutal epoch. Hauled from his vessel by buccaneers or foes in disguise, he was compelled to kneel upon the ship's edge as her assailant hacked at his neck with a corroded blade, demanding multiple inept strikes. The Beaufort women absorbed early the lesson that perseverance demanded flexibility. Her subsequent engagement arrived promptly to Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond, half-sibling to King Henry VI via his mother's clandestine wedlock to Owen Tudor. The Tudors, Welsh newcomers of dubious pedigree, possessed what counted above venerable ancestry the monarch's benevolence. Owen Tudor, a court functionary, had ensnared the affections of Catherine of Valois, widow of Henry V. Their covert nuptials scandalized the elite but yielded sons Edmund and Jasper, whom Henry VI legitimized and ennobled. In 1455 AD, at roughly 12 years of age, Margaret wed Edmund Tudor in a rite that cemented political ties with vows she comprehended, but dimly, binding her to a fate of unimaginable scope. The ceremony unfolded at Bletsoe Castle, the very bastion of her youth, its grand hall adorned with tapestries chronicling Beaufort exploits, while the chapel housed the sepulchre of her grandsire, John Beaufort, Earl of Somerset. Edmund, a battle-hardened man in his 20s, contrasted sharply with Margaret, still shedding her juvenile garb. The union was consummated forthwith, heedless of notions of awaiting bodily readiness, in an age when aristocratic daughters were deemed vessels for lineage perpetuation. That bridal night inflicted a wound Margaret veiled in silence thereafter, its scars etched in her enduring physical impairments and her fervent piety verging on fervor. Soon after the nuptials, Margaret's form underwent transformations that bewildered her immature psyche. Elder women conversed in subdued voices about her state, their countenances blending elation for an heir with trepidation for so youthful a bearer. Her own mother eyed Margaret's burgeoning form with profound unease. She herself had been 18 at Margaret's birth, sufficiently mature to weather parturition unscathed. At 12, verging on 13, Margaret ventured what had felled innumerable hardier women. Yet Edmund Tudor would never behold his progeny. In the fall of 1456 AD, amid skirmishes in Wales against Yorkist adversaries, he was seized at Carmarthen Castle. The details of his apprehension and demise linger obscured in the mists of fratricidal strife and machinations. Some narratives posit a sudden assault scattering his troops across southern Wales. Others insinuate treachery from allies. Whether plague claimed him in captivity or assassins dispatched him, endures as one of history's enigmas. The pestilence tale suited his jailers, for maladies ravaged medieval dungeons, and invoking natural demise, evaded accusations of slaying a royal kin. But chroniclers of the era noted his precipitous deterioration and the denial of healers. What endures is that by November 1456 AD, 13-year-old Margaret stood widowed, gravid, and isolated in a realm teetering toward cataclysm. Word of Edmund's passing reached her at Lampy Palace in Pembrokeshire, where she resided during his campaigns. The herald arrived on a drenched November dusk, his steed foam-flecked from the frantic gallop across Wales. Margaret knelt in the palace oratory, beseeching her husband's safe return, when the messenger's footsteps resounded on the flagstones behind her. She sensed the catastrophe before his utterance shattered her world. Jasper Tudor, Edmund's junior brother, assumed stewardship of his expectant kin, a gesture both gallant and strategic, for Margaret harboured the prospective Tudor scion, bearer of their royal linkage. He escorted her to Pembroke Castle in Wales, where formidable ramparts promised sanctuary from the escalating turmoil. Pembroke perched as a sentinel on the world's fringe, atop precipices overlooking Milford Haven, where oceanic surges battered the crags eternally. The trek to Pembroke, in her late gestation, proved a trial unto itself. Winter thoroughfares were nigh impassable, gouged with iced mire and obstructed by toppled boughs. Margaret journeyed in an equine-borne conveyance, each lurch igniting fresh pangs through her distended frame. What ought to have spanned 2 days extended to 5, skirting swollen streams and evading roving armed bands of uncertain fealty. Pembroke Castle in winter offered austere asylum, erected on a calcareous promontory above the Pembroke River, its colossal silhouette commanding the vista for leagues. The majestic circular donjon, soaring nearly 80 feet, had defied assaults and tempests for 3 centuries, yet its ethos was endurance, not luxury. Chambers were chill and draughty, heated solely by voracious hearths that consumed timber faster than retainers could replenish. The winter of 1456 to 1457 AD raged with exceptional ferocity. Frost etched the inner panes, and marine gales whistled through every fissure in the venerable masonry. Margaret, her abdomen protuberant, could scarcely traverse her room without depletion. Her physique, still juvenile in essence, strained beneath the load it sustained. The castle's healer, an erudite scholar versed at Oxford and Paris, assessed her with mounting disquiet. Her pelvis lacked full maturity. He confided to Jasper. The fetus misaligned, parturition perilous, potentially lethal. Dr. Louis Caerleon, deliverer to sovereigns and serfs alike, drew upon Hippocrates and Galen, lectures from eminent minds, and 4 decades' practice. Yet, confronting this gravid child, his erudition faltered. Margaret's frame remained developmental, the infant robust, malpositioned, exhibiting distress. In a clandestine council in the castle's solar, amid swirling flurries beyond the narrow apertures, he and Jasper deliberated in murmurs. Caerleon was forthright. Such predicaments seldom concluded favorably for dam or offspring. Options were dire. Attempt fetal repositioning, risking instant demise. Procrastinate, courting fetal mortality and maternal fatigue, or essay caesarean, nigh invariably fatal to the bearer. Jasper, scarcely 25, shouldered the grim onus of adjudicating his kin's destiny. If Margaret perished, the Tudor bloodline extinguished with him, a cadet sans legitimate issue. If she endured but forfeited the babe, the outcome mirrored. Political ramifications loomed immense, yet so did fraternal bond. He had warmed to the valiant, astute girl who confronted bereavement with poise. As Margaret's term advanced through the gloom-laden months, she evinced a sagacity transcending her youth. She immersed in political law and governance, intuiting that intellect would arm her in forthcoming trials. Jasper, awed by her acuity and resolve, mentored her in endurance's arts, deciphering visages, discerning subtext in oratory, navigating the labyrinthine alliances and animosities of aristocracy. Margaret delved into devotion with zeal, alarming her entourage, kneeling in the chapel till her knees abraded and bled, committing Latin orisons, poring over doctrinal tomes, forging an intimate divine communion that would buoy her through epochs of strife. Scholars posit her ardent faith as balm for the scars of juvenile wedlock and imminent maternity, a framework for anguish otherwise void of purpose. The castle's cleric, Father Meredith, a Cambridge-schooled Welshman versed in classics and worldly pragmatism, augmented her tutelage. Divinity operated via mortal conduits. Supplication sans deed was hollow, yet deed steered by faith could upheave peaks. On that January eve in 1457 AD, Margaret's travail ignited with spasms that felled her. She had paced the ramparts, heeding Caerleon's prescribed ambulation, when contractions assailed a rending vice seeming to bisect her. She slumped against the battlements, wheezing, as ladies hastened her to quarters. The midwives, veterans of myriad deliveries, traded portentous glances. They recognized the peril of a child birthing a child, nature strained by ambition and exigency. They arrayed tools and invoked heavens, cognizant that dawn might claim one or both. Dame Gwenllian Virch de Fid, chief midwife with 3 decades' lore inherited from maternal forebears, wielded herbal palliatives, repositioning arts, and incantations bolstering parturience. Yet, appraising Margaret, her cragged features sombered. The attendants readied implements with stern precision, blades for severing umbilici or graver interventions, crooks and pincers for extracting stillborns, elixirs fortifying enfeebled mothers, sacred artifacts beseeching celestial aid. The room thickened with aromatic fumes, lavender for serenity, rosemary for vigor, esoteric botanicals known to birth tenders alone. For 18 harrowing hours, Margaret agonized beyond words, her cries rebounding off masonry until her throat rasped mute, yielding primal gasps. Midwives toiled feverishly, palms blood-smeared, striving to preserve duo. Dame Gwenllian deployed her full repertoire. Palpation, postural shifts, botanicals, ceaseless exhortations murmured in Margaret's ear. Jasper patrolled the passages without, his strides echoing, aware the Lancastrian destiny might perish therein. Servitors dashed with steaming basins and pristine cloths, their means mirroring the crisis. Father Meredith prostrated in vigil, imploring ceaselessly for the fragile soul. As Aurora neared, Margaret's vitality waned. Nearly a day in throes, her adolescent form overtaxed. Caerleon, roused from fitful repose, conferred urgently with Dame Gwenllian. The babe lived, yet faltered pulse erratic, feeble. Margaret hemorrhaged inwardly, her heartbeat feeble, complexion ashen as vellum. The verdict: essay manual delivery, a hazardous gambit salvaging the infant perchance at maternal expense. Dame Gwenllian, versed in the method yet untested on so diminutive a frame, aligned Margaret, invoking Saint Margaret of Antioch, childbirth's guardian, as she ventured to steer the newborn forth. When the infant at last emerged, extricated from Margaret's ravaged form in a rite nigh lethal, midwives suspended breath. The neonate, pallid and scarcely respiring, besmeared in sanguine fluid, hung in limbo. The chamber hushed, save Margaret's ragged inhalations and hearth sputter. Then Dame Gwenllian cleared the passages, and a frail, indignant wail pierced the void heralding Henry Tudor, England's prospective sovereign. Margaret, semi-delirious, her shattered frame engulfed in haze, registered her heir's debut amid torment. She strained to grasp him, limbs defiant. Dame Gwenllian laid the babe momentarily upon her bosom, the ritual maternal bond ere whisking him to warmth for ablution and binding. Margaret's gaze pursued him avidly, imprinting his minuscule features. The toll on her physique was grievous and irrevocable. Caerleon, in subsequent scrutiny, discerned profound lacerations and visceral harms irreparable, whispered of rent tissues, organ trauma, hemorrhagic depletion nigh fatal. She would conceive no more. This solitary ordeal terminated her fertility ere inception, at 13 rendered infertile, her generative span immolated for dynastic ends. Bodily convalescence dragged excruciatingly. Weeks she oscillated betwixt existence and abyss, besieged by pyrexia and sepsis. Caerleon administered his arsenal: phlebotomy for humoral equilibrium, herbal cataplasms combating corruption, potent vintages infused with restoratives. Dame Gwenllian vigilated, ladling broth past chapped lips, tracking every flux. Psychological mending proved labyrinthine. Nightmares replayed the horror, rousing her in nocturnal shrieks. She recoiled from contact, even tender. Her bond with her progeny tangled by anguish's association, she adored him profoundly, yet endured his embrace scarcely, inundated by birth's brutality. Yet if Margaret Beaufort's form fractured, her essence endured, unbroken. In languid recovery post Henry's advent, she unveiled the unyielding resolve and shrewd intellect that would elevate her among England's paramount women. Even enfeebled, she grasped her offspring embodied Lancastrian tomorrow. She discerned a destitute widow with infant necessitated aegis amid descending anarchy. The Wars of the Roses erupted with mounting ferocity. 1455 AD's First Battle of Street Albans proclaimed disputes would resolve via steel, not parley. York's White Rose clashed Lancaster's Red in a maelstrom devouring England's elite for 30 years. Richard, Duke of York, asserted sovereignty via Edward III's second son, Lancastrians via fourth son John of Gaunt. Margaret Beaufort, Lancastrian bearer, aligned inexorably with a faltering faction. The Lancastrian monarch Henry VI was deemed feeble, perchance deranged, inept at governance. His consort Margaret of Anjou, adept yet reviled, a alien blamed for Gallic debacles and civil slide. Her recourse: wedlock anew. In 1458 AD, scarcely mended from Henry's birth, she espoused Sir Henry Stafford, cadet to Buckingham's Duke. The rite was subdued, sans Edmund Tudor's splendour. Margaret frail, mourning, her spouse a alien selected for utility over affinity. Stafford sympathised Yorkist yet pragmatically. Safeguarding Margaret secured Beaufort domains and lineages. For her it proffered security for self and heir, albeit bedding her ideological adversary. The compact resembled commerce more than romance, a expedient to exigencies. The accord, brokered by Margaret's dam and Stafford's sire, minutely stipulated: she retained Beaufort holdings, preserving Henry's patrimony. Stafford tendered martial and political veil for Lancastrian leanings. Crucially, young Henry abode Jasper's Welsh wardship, a clause likely life-preserving. The Stafford union spanned 14 years amid England's goriest clashes. Margaret observed fortunes oscillate. Henry VI dethroned, Edward IV enthroned. Henry VI reinstated, Edward IV resurgent. Each sovereign shift imperiled dubious allegiances or prized lineages. Margaret honed navigation of these perils, forging ties with women across divides. Cognizant feminine webs outlasted masculine pacts. She epistolized Elizabeth Woodville, Edward IV's queen, whilst covertly liaising Margaret of Anjou in Gallic banishment diplomacy demanding exquisite finesse, a slip courting treason. Through turbulence, Henry lingered Welsh, Jasper's charge a pragmatic yet rending severance. Margaret glimpsed her sole offspring sporadically, under stringent terms. Henry matured from babe to youth to adolescent, estranged from his dam, reared in Welsh Highlands by his uncle as she threaded court intrigues, the parting essential yet tormenting. Margaret channeled thwarted maternity into missives, ciphered dispatches, piercing faux lines sans peril, gifts accompanied when feasible, volumes, garb, mementos evoking the scarce, known mother. Predominantly, she dwelled in perpetual dread, uncertain of his welfare. Henry's Welsh rearing was thorough, pragmatic. Jasper instilled noble arts equestrianism, bladework, melody, terpsichore, plus survival's rigours. Welsh fluency, agrarian cadences, commanding fealty sans entitlement. These proved priceless upon his regal ascent. Margaret's erudition advanced via Stafford. Estate oversight, ledger scrutiny, societal obligations tapestry. She devoured jurisprudence, chronicles, divinity with scholastic ardour. Her bibliotheca swelled to England's premier private trove, encompassing Latin, French, English tomes on stratagems to mysticism. In 1461 AD, tides turned. Edward IV's Towton triumph, England's bloodiest fray, on snowy Palm Sunday fields in Yorkshire. The 29th of March 50,000 clashed, half perished. Lancastrian edifice crumbled. Henry VI sought Scotland, Margaret of Anjou France with her princeling. Towton's wake menaced Margaret, her Lancastrian essence suspect to Edward IV, Stafford's bond shielding somewhat. Her Welsh toddler loomed as Lancastrian beacon. Edward's ruthlessness known, would it encompass innocence? Margaret endured vigilant insomnia, dreading dawn tidings of Henry's doom. She wove espionage, compensating domestics, traders for Welsh whispers, suborning scribes for regal transcripts, anticipating threats. The strain depleting, yet preservative. In 1469 AD, Stafford sustained edgecoat wound battling for Edward IV, a septic thigh gash crippling him, embittering his Yorkist devotion. He hazarded all for scant recompense. Margaret tended his protracted convalescence, subtly eroding loyalties, not overtly Lancastrian advocacy, perilous but sowing Edward IV's ineptitude seeds, Yorkist graft tales, convincing inadequate requital. The alchemy demanded psychic prowess, surmounting entrenched fidelity, Edward's clemency gratitude, Stafford's wariness via forbearance, iteration, pride exploitation. By 1470 AD, as Warwick rebelled Edward IV, Stafford primed for defection. In 1470 AD, politics kaleidoscoped. Warwick, kingmaker, quarrelled Edward IV, allying Margaret of Anjou to reinstate Henry VI, the grotesque pact. Warwick, having enthroned Edward, warred Lancastrians. Yet vanity trumped history. Margaret eyed with fervent anticipation Henry VI's revival might repatriate her son. She tentatively contacted Lancastrian adherents, probing revolt viability, perilous liaisons, exposure fatal. Henry VI's October 1470 restoration miraculous. Edward IV, Burgundy bound with Gloucester. Henry VI, Tower freed, reinstated. The addled sovereign bemused by reversal. Margaret attended Westminster Rite, witnessing his frailty. Yet ephemeral. Edward IV. March 1470. One return. Burgundian. Backed. Mercenaries amassed. Swiftly rallying. Barnet the 14th of April slew Warwick. Tewkesbury May 4th annihilated Lancastrians. In 1471 AD, Tewkesbury sealed Lancastrian doom, slaying Edward, Prince of Wales, Henry VI as heir. The prince fell in melee, or post-capture slain. Henry VI vanished soon after, terminating direct line. Abruptly, Margaret's adolescent scion emerged Lancastrian claimant, paramount England's most hazardous figure. His assertion attenuated. Beaufort threaded, legitimacy queried ancestrally. Yet sans rivals, Henry's bid burgeoned for Yorkist foes. Jasper, perceiving lethal peril, elected exile over execution, heart-wrenching yet imperative. Abiding Wales courted death. Banishment forfeited all familiar. On tempestuous September 1471 night, 14-year-old Henry embarked Tenby, commencing 14 Brittany years. Flight hasty, perilous. Yorkists encroached Lancastrian redoubts. Scant warning preceded Pembroke incursion. Margaret absent from parting. England bound, learned days later devastating blow. 14 years Welsh separated. Now Channel, sundered, nations hostile. Envisioning Welsh bluffs, gale-lashed mantle, she confronted potential eternal loss. Offspring vanished, cause vanquished, position tenuous as Edward IV consolidated, exacting retributions. Margaret resumed Stafford matrimony with indurated heart. Denied conventional maternity, she metamorphosed. Tactician, resilient, dedicating existence to enthroning her banished heir. Sorrow alchemized to steely aspiration. Observers marveled. Erstwhile demure. Devout maiden, now adroit politico. Foreseeing maneuvers, she erected support lattices, pinpointing nobles swayable to Henry's repatriation, hazardous, draining labor, yet purposeful. Henry Stafford expired 1471 AD, post-exile onset timing dubious to some. Health frail since wound, yet opportune for Margaret's maneuvers. Whether ailment, venom, tension claimed him unclear, demise liberated overt pursuits. Nearing 30, twice bereaved, Margaret pondered third union. Safety beckoned. Obscure lords safeguarding domains, permitting mourning. She elected potency, Thomas Stanley. Lord Stanley, England's shrewdest noble, adept at 11th hour victor, backing, loyalties timed impeccably. His clan commanded northwestern levies, connections spanned court to commerce. For Margaret, Stanley alliance yielded espionage, sway, martial assets vital for Henry's cause. For Stanley, Beaufort prestige, noble ties. Partnership expedient, efficacious. Ceremony lavish, proclaiming Margaret's salience despite exile. 3-day revels, jousts, feasts, liturgies attracting peers. Edward IV attended, preferring monitored peril over clandestine, compact, intricate. Margaret controlled Beaufort lands, pursued Henry's interests. Stanley acquired complementary consort. Mutual utility. Sans romance pragmatic amid trials. Jointly, they traversed Edward IV's waning years, outlasting purges, felling peers. Margaret leveraged Stanley's status for policy intel, exile liaisons. Stanley masked her, amassing power. Meanwhile, Brittany's Henry matured exilic, duchy autonomous under Duke Francis II, pinched betwixt France, England. Henry's tenure tenuous, asset or pawn, yet liability for anti-Edward foci. Mother-son epistles rarer, ciphered, pseudonyms, sympathetic inks, convolutions concealed in banal trade or kin missives, cumbrous, yet connective for Margaret's English web and Henry's banished court. Margaret dreaded Henry's demise, York assassins, malady, mishap abroad. Uncertainty tormented worse than certainty. She arrayed informants, merchants, wayfarers, envoys relaying sightings or tidings. Her espionage expanse astonishing. Palace moles, guild spies, monastic, noble plants across realms. Intel streamed, deployments preempting commanders, gossip preceding royals, monitoring allies divided by enemies' fealties, vitality. Edward IV perished abruptly April 1483 AD. 40. Excesses eroded health, yet untimely, plunging realm into regency crisis for 12-year-old Edward V ripe for autocracy. Yet boy uncrowned. Uncle Richard, Gloucester, usurped via coup stunning hardened peers. Edward V, brother Richard Tower, immured, vanished eternally. Richard III, July 1483 coronation, shadowed by infanticide suspicions. For Margaret, usurpation duel, peril, prospect. Richard eroded Yorkist credence, Henry's Beaufort claim viable versus child, slaying king. She schemed audaciously. Via Bishop John Morton, Exiles, synchronizing domestic revolt with Brittany invasion demanding precision, funds, trans-territorial communiques. October 1483 rebellion founded. Betrayal unmasked invasion. Margaret beheld co-plotters' executions in dread. Stanley's bond spared her death. Yet House arrested, divested titles. Undaunted, she persisted via ciphers, loyalists months strategizing Henry's return and rule. When Henry landed Milford Haven August 1485 AD, Margaret's Stanley cultivation fruited. Bosworth Field the 22nd of August 1485 AD. Richard III perished, Leicestershire Mire. Stanley's, arrayed Richard's flank, betrayed Margaret's years, orchestrated pivot. Her son reigned. Henry VII triumphed post 28 separation years, 14 exile, decades scheming. Margaret ascended England's mightiest woman, yet maternal simplicity forever forfeit to exigency. She witnessed Henry found Tudors, wed Elizabeth York uniting houses, sire Henry VIII. She departed 1509. Post Henry VIII's ascension, art consummated from Pembroke's sanguine chamber. Margaret's triumphs toll incalculable. Body yielded for king, maternity to necessity, joy to ambition. The 13-year agonized girl unimagined her destiny. King's dam, dynasty founder, Roses's terminator via maternal love politicized. In Westminster Abbey, her ebony marble tomb bears Latin epitaph chronicling feats on sacrifice. Yet absent, distant screams resonance child's torment birthing England's future. That echo, saga's genesis, lingers Pembroke's walls, Atlantic breakers crashing, gales whispering through stones of girl ascended queen mother via unendurable childhood woe.